Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Vander Gack. I use they, them pronouns. I am Northeast SARE's communications specialist. This is our large grant pre-proposal Q&A session. This is the third session. Just some quick rundown of what we can look forward to today. We're going to do some quick introductions of staff here while we do a little welcome poll and give people who are need a couple more minutes a chance to show up. And then we're going to move into a presentation about our programs, a real quick one, and then we're going to open it up into question and answer sessions, kind of a general, about all of the things, and then we're going to break into individual breakout rooms by the programs. And so it's going to be a lot of stuff we're going to go through real quick. So right now, staff is going to introduce themselves while I get a poll going. It would be great if you can fill that out. And once again, I'm Vander Gack, Northeast SARE's Communications.
Hi all, I'm Heather Omond. I'm the Associate Director of Northeast SARE, and I am the Grant Administrator for the Research and Education Grant Program. And I'll pass to Caitlin.
Good afternoon, Caitlin Cerna. I use she, they pronouns, and I am the Grant Administrator for this large grant, the Research for Novel Approaches program, as well as a graduate student grant program. Katie?
Hi folks, Katie Campbell-Nelson. I'm the Professional Development Grant Program Coordinator, and she, her, and I'll pass to Emma.
Hey folks, I'm Emma. I use she, her pronouns. I'm our grant program specialist, which means I support all our grant admins in running these programs, and I will be here taking notes so we can get all of your Q&As posted on the website so you can reference them later. And I'll pass to Nevin.
Hello, I'm Nevin Dawson, he, him, and I am the Professional Development Program Associate Coordinator working with Katie on that program.
And those are our staff people introductions. If folks want to toss who they are and where they're from into the chat, and kind of, it's always cool to see the connections that happen between potential grantees in these kind of spaces. So feel free to participate that way. And then we're going to move into our presentation now, and then we can submit questions in the chat, or we can raise hands after that. And take it away, Heather.
Thanks, Vander. Okay, so just a heads up, today's overview, the slide portion is going to be really brief and focused on supporting you all to decide which grant program is the right fit for you. We highly recommend that you watch the full 50-minute webinar on our website if you're interested in digging deeper into who SARE is, the nuance between the programs, if you want to learn more about pre-proposals. All of those things are covered in greater depth in that 50-minute pre-recorded webinar. So this time is really going to focus on the differences between the three programs, the application timeline, and what is new. And the reason we want to focus on the differences between the programs is because we'll have some group question and answer right after the slides. But as Vander said, after that, we're going to go into breakout rooms by program. So now I'm going to do the thing where I take just a second to figure out how to share my screen with you all and get all of my windows sorted. Thank you for your patience. Okay, can folks see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so we are talking today about three of our grant programs, what we call the large grants, and they are the Research and Education Grant Program, the Research for Novel Approaches Grant Program, and the Professional Development Program. As a side note that hopefully is a helpful clarifier, the reason why we call them 2025 grants is because the awards will be made next year. But please make no mistake, all of the proposal due dates for both pre-proposal and full proposal are indeed this year. Okay, here is the timeline. So the pre-proposal deadline, as you all likely know, is Tuesday, August 6th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are very strict with our 5 p.m. So we really recommend that folks get in there well before that time, just in case you encounter any glitches, technological things like that. Don't put yourself scrambling at 4:45 and potentially not be able to get it in. Full proposal invitations. So for those pre-proposals that are invited to submit full proposals, those invitations will be sent out on September 3rd. All applicants will be notified of their status at that time, whether invited or not. Applicants with successful pre-proposals will receive all of the information needed to submit a full proposal, and all applicants will have reviewer comments. The full proposal due date is Tuesday, October 29th at 5 p.m. and all award decisions will be communicated in late February of 2025. Contracts, all contracts, their official start date will be March 1st, although project activities can begin at a later date. It's worth noting that the contracting process can take 1 to 2 months, so contracts will likely not be finalized until April or May of 2025. And new grantee orientation meetings with Northeast SARE staff will happen in March of 2025 as well. So who can apply? Applicants from extension, colleges, universities, for-profit businesses, including consultants and farmers, can apply. Municipalities, nonprofits, tribal governments, state and federal departments, really anyone working in agriculture, as long as it's, within these buckets. And applicants and host organizations can indeed be located outside of the Northeast region, as long as the project activities and the audience served are all located primarily within the Northeast. That's something we get a fair bit of questions about. Differences between the three programs. So the research and education and professional development grant programs, you can see both require a performance target. Research for Novel Approaches does not. Performance target is a fancy term for the outcome of your project if everything goes exactly to plan. And then each of these programs funds a different type of work or audience. So I'll talk a little bit about that. A research and education project must include, and really the core component, is a robust farmer education program that will result in measurable on-farm changes. That's what's described by that performance target, and that has to lead to greater sustainability. The focus on farmer behavior change is the key component of this grant program. It may also include an applied research component that supports and makes sense with the education program. But again, research is not required. Education is the only required component of a R&E grant. And applicants are generally researchers, farmers, educators, and others who work with farmers. A Research for Novel Approaches project has to include a strong proof of concept applied research component that is intended to confirm the benefits or feasibility of new practices and approaches that have a high potential for farmer adoption. Applicants are generally researchers, but can come from any of those eligible organizations previously mentioned, including community organizations, farmers, consultants, or traditional research institutions. So research that is relevant to farmers and is close to being ready for adoption is the core focus of that program. For the professional development program, that provides education for educators and service providers who work with farmers. These service providers then use what they've learned through participation in the project in their work with farmers, which is described by the performance target. Applicants are generally people who work with farmers, educators, and service providers, and education for service providers is the core focus of this program as compared to education for farmers with the research and education grant. So the minimum funding level for each of these programs is $30,000, and none of them have official funding caps. But the upper end of proposals funded are typically around $250,000 for research and education, $200,000 for research for novel approaches, and $150,000 for professional development, depending on the project's complexity and duration. But I do want to emphasize that there is no official cap, and we have funded grants in these programs that is higher than the sort of guideline that we offer here. These are similarities between the three grant programs. Projects in any of these programs can all last between 1 and 3 years. Proposal is required for all of them. It is not possible to submit a full proposal if you haven't had an invited pre-proposal. There are required collaborators, the advisory committee, which please note, you don't have to describe at the pre-proposal phase, but it is good to know about that if you are invited to submit a full proposal, you will have to have an advisory committee that consists of at least 2 farmers and 1 agricultural service provider. The eligible and ineligible expenses are the same across these 3 programs. So eligible expenses include labor, materials and supplies, services, meeting and training expenses, subawards to partner organizations, indirect costs up to 10% of the total direct costs, and any project-specific equipment. Ineligible expenses are any costs used to start or expand farming operations, such as land, structures, generally tractors. Those things are not allowed. So some of you may be aware that in 2023 into early 2024, or sorry, throughout 2024, what year is it? Early 2024, as part of our diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice strategic plan, we paused 5 of our grant programs, and that gave our staff the capacity that we needed to begin the process of reorganizing our structure, our culture, and redesigning our grant programs. If you're interested in that work, there's a link here on the slide, and some folks can drop it in the chat. You can learn more about what we've been up to. But I think the most important thing to lift up today is that these 3 programs are largely unchanged for the current cycle. However, our grant-making redesign working group is actively rebuilding our calls for proposals from the ground up. So it is possible that you will see substantial changes in these programs next year. We just want to be honest and open about that. And then I am going to talk about the one significant change that is in these calls for proposals for these programs this year, which is we have reshaped the way that we ask about and score engagement with historically underserved farming communities. We still encourage connections with underserved and especially BIPOC farming communities. And there are 2 questions in the pre-proposal call that address this. One that asks about farming communities you plan to serve, regardless of who they are, how you know what their needs are, how you know that they want to work with you to address those needs, etc. And again, that question is not on this slide. That question applies regardless of who you're working with. And then there's this historically underserved farming communities question. The response to this question is no longer optional. And the responses regarding connections to communities and engagement with these audiences is now scored. So in order to receive the highest possible score, a project must engage with at least 1 historically underserved farming community as defined by the USDA, which is what you see here on this slide. However, working with a historically underserved farming community is not required to submit a proposal. Those invited to submit full proposals will be expected to demonstrate an authentic connection with the farming communities that the project will serve, including those indicated with these checkboxes. So it just feels so important to lift up that it is better for an applicant to submit a proposal focused on communities they do have authentic relationships with than it would be for an applicant to submit a proposal, check some of these boxes, and then fail to be able to document strong and meaningful relationships with those communities. And then this is my last slide. It's just a couple tips about planning your pre-proposal if you are going to submit one. So it's really important to note there are no supplemental documents submitted with a pre-proposal. We do not require host organization approval, which means that we don't need any form submitted by your organization that they're willing to host this. We don't need that at this point. We would need it at the full proposal stage, but the pre-proposal is really a concept document. Although we always caution folks, like, of course, be familiar with whatever your organization requires around internal review for applications. We no longer ask for any budget information in the pre-proposal, but just be aware that if you're invited to submit a full proposal, a detailed budget will be required at that time. We like people to know up front that funds are reimbursed. All SARE grants are reimbursed on a net 30-day basis. This does mean that your organization has to make the initial payments for project expenses, but we work hard to process your invoices as quickly as possible to get those reimbursed. Matching funds are not required by SARE at this time on any of our grant programs. They are not encouraged and do not increase a proposal's ranking. Results of all funded projects are part of the public domain. And we just ask that folks consider contacting us as soon as possible to request any disability-related accommodations so that we can do the best possible job we can to support those needs. And those are all of my slides. And so now we have some time for general clarifying questions that will help you all choose a breakout room to go into. If there are none, we can move into breakout groups, but usually there are a few. Folks are welcome to either come off mute or put them in the chat, whatever's easier for you.
I'll ask a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. A question about land fees. I know you said a part of the budget can't be purchasing land. If you work for like a cooperative extension or something like that, we often have land fees when we do work at our farm. Could we include that in the budget or no?
Yes. Yep. Land rental, greenhouse rental, space usage, those kinds of fees are absolutely allowable. It really is just the purchase of land or of structures.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Oh, sorry. I can't see.
Oh, go ahead, Karen, and then
Okay.
I'll get to the one in the chat.
Thanks. Okay. I was just wondering if you could walk through the steps of the pre-proposal a little bit. Like I've looked through the document, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding like the total length and yeah, I don't know if you could, yeah, just talk through some of the elements of the pre-proposal.
I think that might be a better conversation because each of the pre-proposals for each of the grant programs are a little bit different and are going to have slightly different total lengths. So that's probably a better question for the breakout room. And I can just say that you're able to get into the online system at any time now. It's open. And so you can also get in there and see how the online, like the online application mirrors and reflects the call for proposals. But I definitely recommend bringing that question to the breakout groups.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I see, how does SARE define close to adoption? Kaylin, do you want to take that or would you like me to?
If you could, please.
Sure. I would say we don't have like a rigid definition for this. The answer always becomes you're going to have to make the case to reviewers that you have some documentation that the research you're doing is close, has evidence that it is likely to be useful to farmers, but you're not quite there yet. And that with some additional research, you expect farmers to be able to safely adopt this if the practice is the right fit for their farm. So I know that's not an explicit answer, but it is the best answer we have, is really that you have to make the case to reviewers that it is almost ready to be adopted. Can SARE assist with establishing relationships with the farmer communities? We cannot.
I can add a little bit more context to that. Well, yes, Heather's answer is absolutely true. We cannot. We have state coordinators located at each land grant institution around the Northeast region. I had to find a link to the page in our website, but you may contact them because they do have more relationships with farmers in each of the states that they work with. And so they may be a good contact for you to help you find out, you know, depending on the topic of your grant, how to find different groups of farming audiences in the states you may be working. And yeah, there's the link Vander just pasted.
Thank you, Katie. In regards to the advisory committee, what defines an eligible individual to act as a farmer? So in general, I'm going to drop a link in the chat for our definition of a farm. in general, when we talk about farmers, we're talking about people who meet this definition. And generally it's any producer who generates at least $1,000 of saleable product in a calendar year. It doesn't have to actually be sold, but that is our, we are a USDA grant program, and that is the USDA's definition of a farm. Do we have funding available for youth programs, intro to gardening, partnerships with those local schools and community gardens? Generally, the answer to this question is no. There is some light caveat to that, which is that, so Northeast SARE, as a USDA funded grant program, we are legislated to serve farmers that meet that definition of a farm that I put in the chat. So any grant that we fund across our grant programs, the primary benefiting audience of those grant projects have to be farmers that meet that definition. That being said, you can have secondary audiences that are both participating in your project activities and benefiting from the work that you're doing, that might be folks that are youth or are beginning farmers or are people in the community that want to learn about the things that your grant is educating about, but they can't be the primary audience, not with SARE. Thanks for asking that question. What documentation will you need to show we are working with limited resource farmers? Will we need to, fill out the form NRCS has farmers fill out using their tax returns? No, the answer is no. We do not currently require, it's the response to the questions, the prompts in the call is how reviewers evaluate this. And so at the full proposal level, there's going to be more words and more response and the opportunity to, I believe, submit like optional letters of people saying, yes, we represent this community and we support this project, but we don't have any kind of forms associated with this evaluation process at this time. If a community garden is incorporated and produces more than $1,000 in agricultural value, it is a farm, correct? Yes, if you meet that definition. Again, it doesn't have to be sold. It has to be $1,000 of saleable product. Okay, I'm gonna answer these last two questions, and then Caitlin is gonna introduce the breakout rooms, and we'll go just to make sure we have plenty of time for those. Our FSA registered farmer is our lead instructor. Does that qualify us for funding so he can teach the community to farm? Again, the primary benefiting audience, so not necessarily project team members, but the people who are benefiting from your project need to meet the definition of a farm. And so if those folks aren't currently producing $1,000 of product worth of product per year, then they wouldn't be eligible for a SARE, a Northeast SARE grant. Do Northeast breweries and craft distillers qualify as agribusiness for these grants? Same response. It has to be people, and that definition of a farm document that I put, and thank you. Anyways, I put the link to the definition of a farm in the chat earlier. Really, the people, the primary audience for the project activities that you're applying for have to meet that definition of a farm. And breweries and distillers, unless they are the ones growing the products going into the value add, they would not count for a Northeast SARE grant. Okay.
All right. We are going to move into the breakout room section of the Q&A. And here you'll be able to talk with the grant administrator of each of the programs. So we're going to have 3 rooms. Research and education is with Heather. Professional development is with Katie. And then research for novel approaches is with me, Caitlin. Just to note a couple things, the Q&As, the questions and answers that are asked today and in breakout rooms are accumulated as a list, and we post those on our website. So just give us a couple days to get those up, but we will be sharing that information. There is also one more session of these Q&As, and your registration link from today will give you access to that. So if you want to come back and ask other questions, that's an option as well. And then you can always reach out to the grant admin that you're going to meet in the breakout rooms for additional questions and info. And last thing is that we're going to end in breakout rooms. So we're not going to come back together when our Q&A concludes at 2 p.m. But during the time, if you want to check out a different grant program, or you realize maybe one's a better fit, you can hop between rooms. Any questions before we break out? One is, can we access previous recordings? And those are housed on the website.
Okay.
Apologies, I was affixing that link there and we need to get the breakout rooms launched. Give me just a moment.
Well, that's okay, Vander. I've got 2 questions that I can address while you do that. So one of the questions is, which breakout room should I join for a mushroom farming project? It really depends on who your audience is and whether your focus is research or education. So if your audience is farmers, then that would either be the Research for Novel Approaches or the Research and Education grant. And if research is really your core activity and it's like you're not quite sure if this thing you're researching is ready for adoption yet, that would be Research and for Novel Approaches. If what you really want to do is educate other farmers and also do some research to go along with an education plan that's based on ready to adopt practices, that would be a Research and Education. If you want to work with service providers for farmers, that would be a professional development program. So hopefully that's enough to get you started. You can always hop between rooms if you find yourself in the wrong spot. And thank you, Caitlin, for addressing there are previous recordings for the Q&A sessions.
So if you click on breakout rooms at the bottom, Vander's working on getting those posted. They're up. You can click which room you want to join, and your grant admin will be there in just a jiffy. So we'll see you soon.